Good morning, everyone. It's good to see everyone. I'm Myozan, and I'm really pleased to share some ideas about one of our ancestors, Rinzai in Japanese, or Linji Jingzhuang in Chinese. I want to thank my teachers, Shishin Roshi and Roshi Shinko, for giving me the opportunity to study a bit about Linji and share my findings with you today. And I want to take a moment also to acknowledge the recent passing of our Dharma brother, Dennis Hohen Darby. May you find peace and light wherever you are. So in the process of thinking of Linji and looking for information, I came in contact with a book that is right here, Zen Battles, Modern Commentary on the Teachings of Master Linji. And it's a book by Thich Nhat Hanh that tells us a bit about Linji's biography at the beginning of the book. And then later there are some commentaries that are there. Master Linji, as some of you might know, lived during the Tang Dynasty in China. And he was born in the western province of Shandong, sometime between 810 and 815. It's a time where records are a bit different than today, so it's an estimation of his birth. But there is clarity that he died in 867 at the age of 55, which is rather young, in my opinion. So some of you might have seen a portrait of Linji. So here is his portrait that you might have encountered before. This is a portrait that was painted by another ancestor, Hakuin Ekaku, in the 1700s, so 900 years after the passing of Linji. Our guess could be that it's not an exactly accurate portrait, a bit like when we see images of, for example, Jesus with blue eyes and pale brown hair, and we know that he was a Middle Eastern man. It might be a little bit different, so we don't know exactly what he looked. But I still like this image. I felt that the book was almost looking at me the whole time that it was lying around my place. He's kind of not looking directly, but at the same time, there's a presence that is there. Linji left his family rather young and traveled north to study with Huang Po, or also named Obaku in Japanese, who was his main teacher. And as we have seen in a few of the talks about our ancestors that have been presented in this series, the 9th century was a time of political instability in China. There was government repression, which culminated in a decree issued by Emperor Tang Wuzong in 845, ordering that all monks and nuns should disrobe and return to lay life. So many temples and statues were destroyed, but that was true particularly in cities. And in the book Zen Battles, Thich Nhat Hanh suggests that monasteries in remote areas were less affected, and perhaps permitting the continuation of practice in a different way, even in times of political instability. So in the commentary of case 86 of the book of Equanimity, Shishin Roshi tells us about Linji's first years at the monastery. And this is a story that appears in many records. And we learned that for 3 years, Linji accomplished his work assiduously. He was a dedicated student. But we also learned that he never went to meet Obaku in an interview for 3 years. So not a question, not a word to the teacher. And when the head monk realizes that Boshuku in Japanese, he tells Rinzai, go ask a question. And Rinzai says that he would not know what to ask. Why don't? And Boshuku says, why don't you ask him what is the essential meaning of Buddhism? And so it was in some ways a generic question and not a question that came from Rinzai, but in taking part in this practice, we could imagine how there are many questions, right, that have emerged. Like we all have been there at the Dokusan line or ready to go see the teacher. And even if we're working on our koan and we already plan what to say, there are many enigmas, questions, ideas that can come to mind at that moment. So Rinzai beautifully went to Obaku, and before he could finish his question, Obaku hit him a sharp blow. And that's something that we see continuing with Rinzai, as I will talk about a little bit later. And Bokushu asked him what happened with Rinzai, and Rinzai said, before I could get a word out of him, he hit me. I don't understand. And Boshuku said, well, go ask him again, go a second time. And the record doesn't tell us if Rinzai hesitates. He goes and asks again, and Obaku hits him again. And Rinzai asks a third time, and Obaku hits him a third time. So Rinzai related this experience to Boshuku, saying, you urged me to go ask about the Dharma, but all I got was a beating. Because of evil karmic hindrances, I'm not able to comprehend the essential mystery. So today I'm going to leave here. So Rinzai is ready to leave the temple, feeling depleted, feeling that he has failed. And Boshuku says, if you're going to leave, you must say goodbye to the master. So Rinzai bowed and went off. And then Boshuku went to Obaku and said to Obaku that the monk that asked the question, in his perspective, he was extraordinary. And Boshuku says, if he comes to say goodbye to you, please give him appropriate instruction. Later, he will become a great tree under which everyone on earth will find refreshing shade. So the next day when Rinzai came to say goodbye to Master Obaku, Obaku said, you don't need to go somewhere else, but just go over to the Goan monastery and practice with Daigu. He will explain to you. So Rinzai is sent to a different place, and the continuation of the story is in case 86, where we learn about Linji's awakening experience. And it also appears in the commentaries of case 11 of the Blue Cliff records. So I'm going to read here the main case 86, that is the story of Rinzai's awakening. And it says, attention, Rinzai asked Master Obaku, what is the ultimate meaning of Buddhism? In response, Obaku hit him. That happened 3 times. So he left Obaku and went to see Master Daigu. Daigu asked, where do you come from? Rinzai replied, I come from Obaku. Daigu asked, what did Obaku have to say? Rinzai said, I asked, what is the ultimate meaning of Buddhism 3 times, and 3 times I tasted his steak. I don't know if I was at fault or not. And Daigu exclaimed, Obaku is such an old grandmother to be so very kind to you, but still you come and ask if you are not at fault or not. And at these words, Rinzai attained great enlightenment. And later we learned that after this great enlightenment, Rinzai says there's not much to Obaku's Buddha Dharma. And Daigu grabbed him and said, "You little bedwetter, you just said you don't understand, and now you say there's not much to Obaku's Buddha Dharma." And Rinzai hit Daigu 3 times, and Daigu pushed him away and said, "Your teacher is Obaku. It has nothing to do with me. Go away." So in some ways, recognizing, right, the time that Rinzai spent under Obaku's trees, and Rinzai was ready to open at that tipping point when he has his enlightenment experience. And so after his awakening, Linji is said to have traveled between Huangpo's monastery and Daigu's hermitage, and he took care of Daigu as he was aging and dying for 10 years. But later, Linji had his own temple in Jeonju, Hebei's province, where he taught. And as was the custom at the time, Linji took the name of the mountain in which he lived and taught until his death. I think that in the last talk, Tetsudo explained how, according to this tradition, Shishin Roshi would be named Bertud if it was the case of taking the name of the geographical place where teachers are located. So I'm going to talk now a little bit about the record of Linji, which is this book that I was presenting a little bit earlier, which is the record of the talks that were compiled. But as many spiritual texts, they were compiled later after the death of Lingji during the Song era, which is from 1960 to 1279. And so we don't know much of the earliest copy of the, in Chinese, Linji Lu, but the earliest piece of evidence are wood blocks that were cut in 1120. And the book is also known in Japanese Zen tradition as the Book of Rinzai. So I looked a little bit like there's all sort of scholarship on the record of Linji, and there's a religious studies scholar, Mario Pocheski, who says of the record, ever since its initial compilation in the early 11th century, Linji's record has enjoyed great popularity and revered status as an essential repository of timeless Chan wisdom, to which the numerous modern translations testify, including several different versions in both English and Japanese. And I also found an interesting take on the record of Linji. So a scholar named Albert Welter argues that the record of Linji functioned in a way as a process to retroactively fashion Linji's image at a moment in which the Linji school was growing. So the Linji school was growing, and that the record in some way functioned to create not necessarily a myth, but a particular facet of Linji. And in other words, the records serve as a way to establish the school resting on a heroic figure. And this was interesting to find because it contrasted a little bit with an idea that Thich Nhat Hanh shares in Zen Battles when he says that Linji did not like to be called master. He called himself a good spiritual friend, someone who could help others on the path. A little bit contrasting with this view of a school establishing a particular founding figure. So while Linji dies young at 55 years old, his school continues to this day. Our teacher's teacher, Matsumi Roshi, was empowered by teachers in both the Rinzai and the Soto schools. So we could say that we belong to the Rinzai school in some ways. And the 5 major schools of Zen, as you know, have heard in other talks, emerged during the Tang Dynasty between 618 and 907. But during Linji's life, the school was rather small and obscure. It truly flourished and got established during the Song Dynasty, so after his death. And Rinzai today, Rinzai Zen today in Japan is a single organized body. Rather, it's divided in 14 branches, or 15 if you count a practice style called Obaku, referred to by the names of their head temples, of which half are based in Kyoto. And the largest and most influential school that you might have heard of, the Myoshinji branch, whose head temple was founded in 1342. So this is like a school that continues today. And Rinzai Zen always had many branches, even at its origins in China, and during its development, it absorbed, in fact, 3 of the 5 schools, the emerging schools in the Tang Dynasty. There are many ways in which we could think about that school, but as we're talking about Linji or Rinzai today, let's go to the origins of the Rinzai school. So Rinzai is said to have studied diligently and gained deep and extensive knowledge of the sutras, commentaries, and the monastic precepts. He noticed that even if monks studied diligently the readings, it did not really influence their understanding or their transformation. So Master Linji let go in some ways of the study to concentrate on his practice. And on this, Thich Nhat Hanh says, Master Linji had a solid knowledge of the Buddhist canon, but his teaching method was based on his confidence that human beings need only to wake up to their true nature and live as ordinary people. One of the famous teachings of Master Linji we often hear about is about the true person of no rank. The true person of no rank, who is this person? Well, Rinzai says in case 38, this true man of no rank, what a shit stick he is. And so Rinzai is often known for his very direct style that involved hitting, slapping, and physical intimidation. We see that in many of the cases, and we see an example of that in the Blue Cliff record, case 32, entitled Jojoza Stand Still. So I'm going to read this case. It says, Jojoza asked Rinzai, what is the essence of Buddhism? Rinzai, getting up from his seat, seized him, slapped him, and pushed him away. Jojoza stood still. A monk standing by said, Jojoza, why don't you bow? When Jojoza bowed, he suddenly became enlightened. So we can picture here a very vivacious, embodied, intuitive practice in which no ideas, words, nor even cities goes on, hit, slap, awake. And in some ways, I think it's difficult for contemporary minds in the West to grasp this type of teaching. We're in a society in which physical violence between individuals is sanctioned, not to say between positions such as teachers and students. I remember my father telling me that growing up when he was in school in Paraguay, if a student misbehaved, the teacher would ask him to put his fingers together like this, and then the teacher would come with a ruler and slap the fingers, right? It was part of the educational system, and it was seen as regular way of teaching in the broader educational system. But if your child or grandchild or nephew or niece or any child in your surroundings came back home to you and told you the story that their teacher hit them with a ruler, we can be pretty sure that this teacher would be sanctioned soon in the current Western world. But I want to think a little bit about these moments of slapping, of hitting, of surprising, and awakening for a moment in other ways. And I want to think about it in terms of what kind of wisdom, what kind of truth is there within the body? What is it that your body can tell that your mind does not know how to articulate? What happens when I surprise you? Hey, to enter in dialogue with Rinzai a bit here. I've thought, and we probably all have thought a little bit about the place of the body in practice. And I don't know if it has happened to you, that you're sitting and you feel like a blockage, or you can see parts of your bodies where things seem to get tight or stuck. And I remember that towards the first years of my practice, I decided to join a Tai Chi group for a year, because every time I sat, I felt some tightness that in my everyday life I wouldn't perceive, but in meditation practice, I could see was there. So I was, what can help the energy circulate, right? Like what can help keep the practice going. And for some reason, I read this blockage as a blockage also in my practice. We'll never know if that was the case or not. But the body is for sure implicated, right? In our practice central. We've all had sits where our knees hurt or our neck is a little bit stiff. And it's something that we're with, right, throughout our practice. And so your body expresses its wisdom towards this mind of not knowing and knowing it all at once, suddenly. When for a moment there is no head, no eyes, no ears, no nose, just a slap, a microsecond in between two breaths suspended in time. What is there when there are no words, no concepts, no ideas, no Buddhas and students? When you stumble on the street and it seems that you're gonna fall, and the wisdom of your body picks you up. That microsecond before you're scared, before you start making a story about the street and how the city needs to patch this hole, what is there? So before it hurts, before your nervous system sends you into fight, flight, or freeze, what is there? What is there when Jojoza bowed? So another way of thinking about this in terms of the slapping and hitting is also think about this place in your practice in which you can be in a hurricane, and no matter how windy it is, you will be in the eye of the hurricane, where nothing bothers, where you don't feel that wind, where you don't feel that circle going on and on that is taking everything around. So if you have sat for longer periods of practice, it's interesting to see how after practice we can address at times challenges in a different way. And it's not a direct recipe, right? Like we all come out of our Zazen period in different ways, but we all have had probably those experiences that we get up from this period of practice, and what seemed to be the end of the world before you started practice seems more approachable. And I remember a friend who told me that after her first sesshin, her girlfriend came to pick her up and told her that her car had been towed several days ago, and that now she had to go pay $1,000 to get it out of the pound. So that was a slap, right? Like a modern slap. And her reaction was, okay, I can deal with that. And she realized that something had happened then, because it was not her habitual reaction to these kinds of events. So obviously a few days later, the nervous system kicks in again, and we can get caught up in everyday life. But we hope that with every sit, there's a little bit of wisdom that we connect to and that we can open up. And that's why it's also important, right, to take care of this practice, to stay connected with that eye of the hurricane. So when the student is hit, where are they at in the storm or in the eye of the hurricane? When your car is towed, what happens? Where is your mind at, your body, your nervous system? We don't strive towards, we don't strive or try to necessarily attain that moment of practice, right? Like in this story, my friend simply, at that moment that she heard the news, her mind was at a place where it didn't seem something that she couldn't approach or take care of. So where is your body and mind at? Are you at a place where when your car is towed, you go, no? So Rinzai is also often represented as shouting. A case that occurs at the end of his life represents this instance in the Book of Equanimity. In case 13, Rinzai's blind donkey. And the main case goes, attention, when Rinzai was about to pass away, he charged Sancho, after I depart, do not let my true Dharma eye be extinguished. Sancho said, how could I let your true Dharma eye be extinguished? Rinzai countered, if someone suddenly asks you about it, how will you reply? Sancho gave a shout, and Rinzai remarked, who would have thought that my true Dharma eye would be extinguished in reaching this blind donkey? So in the commentary, Shishin Roshi says that in the Zen tradition, it's said that the first instance of Dharma transmission was when Shakyamuni Buddha said, I have the all-pervading true Dharma eye. Now I give it to Mahakashyapa. I want to bring our attention here for a few moments to the shouting. And Sancho is asked a deep question that one could expound on. And how will you practice so this fire does not extinguish? It goes on and on and on. And in a sense, Linji speaks of a fire that already cannot be extinguished. Sancho summarizes all teachings, all views, all angles in a single shout. Some of you were at the last session in December, the last 7-day session, and we practice with Mu during the chanting period where we were just exercising our voices and in a way reviving the school of shouts, roaring like a lion, what travels through our voice, a shout that can wake you up. That felt a bit familiar to me. The first group that I practiced with, Great Mountain Sangha in New Jersey, would often be practicing in the Zendo, and we would be often practicing the Zendo, and people would go to the interview with the teacher, and you would hear someone shouting Mu at the top of their lungs. And it was not necessarily a group where, like the teachers or the senior people would shout at us. But there were like moments of expression of the voice where in the morning the teacher would ask us to practice shouting Mu in the Zendo for 3 times in a row. Or that was often the answer to some koans that students would bring to the interview with the teacher in that practice style. And we did a session near a place that was near a forest. And during the breaks, I remember I would walk far enough from where session would take place and just stand in between. Like there were 2 paths that were there in the trails. And then I would stand in between them and just kind of shout like at the top of my lung, whoa. And sometimes it felt like connecting to the practice, no conceptual ideas or thoughts, or not wondering what was the answer to a koan, or not trying to make sense of anything, just sitting, or in that case, standing and shouting at the top of my lungs, a very primal reaction that we all have had, whether we dropped something, we crossed the street and we didn't see a car coming, or we are there and intentionally drop into just that Mu or that no or that shout that comes through us deeply. So is this Rinzai's shouts? Is this the Rinzai school's shouts that come through the person of no rank? Is this not letting the true Dharma eye, be extinguished? Is this the woods? Is this a voice? Is this the extent of all universe congregating at sunset, at sunrise, in the most intimate corners of the galaxy? And so thank you so much.